Hello, everyone. We're going to do one more web services video this week. And in this video, what I'm going to do is take you through an entire workflow on how web services can be used to support an application. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to take a simple, let's say, a shopping application where a customer logs in, uh, adds some items to a cart, and then checks out and gets the price, total price of the order. That's what we're going to build today, and you will see how we can do this entirely using web services to support all of the queries and the exchanges with the database that the application will need. So let's see how that's done using Oracle APEX and web service. First, let's take a look at the database that we will be using. Here is a very simplistic model of a store. We have a store, stores carry products. Products have two different subtypes in this application. There's bulk products that have expiration date and price per pound, whereas packaged products have a make and a price, maximum price, or whatever it is. Stores also have employees and customers, and their subtypes of person, and customers would add products to their cart, and then eventually they'll complete the checkout process. So that's essentially what the database is. So we convert this into a schema. This is what it would look like. You'll have stores, products, person with the customer subtype, and product with the bulk and package subtypes. And then since carts can have multiple products, we have a line item associative entity where carts have multiple line items. Products could go as line items in different carts. So those are the primary tables that we would be using. We'll be using the person table with the customer subtype. We'll be using product with its own subtypes, and then carts that get added to products that get added to line items of carts. So that's what we would be using. Here's a quick glance at the database that we'll be using with a store table. We won't be using much of the store table. Is a person table with the customer subtype and employee subtype. What I have done is in the last video, all of our primary keys were being sent from the application. This time, we're going to take a look at what can we do if primary keys are getting automatically generated. So in that case, when we insert something new, we will need to fetch the new primary key that just got generated because the application doesn't know what primary key we used. So we'll see how that works. So let's take a look at the actual application that we're building. So in this application, what we're going to do is we're going to first have a customer sign in using some sort of a SSO, single sign-on process. But at the end of the day, we're going to know the customer's ID, and we will find the details of the customer from the customer table. So that's our first step. Then the customer is creating an order, so we will need to create a new order and get the new order ID or cart ID. Then the customer probably browses the product, so we'll find out, create a web service to get a list of all the products. And then we are going to allow the customer to add items to the product. So we're going to be inserting new items to the cart using the add item service. And then finally, once all the items have been added, we're going to check out the cart and get the price, the total price of the cart. So that's basically the workflow that we're going to implement using web services today. So let's see how we do that using all web services. So we're going to be creating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and potentially a 6th web service to take a look at the cart if we need to. So let's create these web services. So first we're going to create a new module, and let's call this module shopping. And we're going to say base path is also shopping. And as you know, it's basically going to create a base path of This was, as you remember, this was the name of my services, and then shopping is the new module that we just created. Now what we're going to do is start creating templates. As we said, the first template that we're going to be creating is some sort of a customer sign-in process where we will provide the ID of the customer and get the detail of the customer. So that's a simple get request. So we can just go to create a template and let's call it customer colon ID. So as you remember that this is how we send parameters to the request, and we're going to create a request, and our handler is going to be a simple get handler. And so we create a handler. Since customer, we know the customer's ID, we're only going to get a single item from the database. So we can just set the source type to be single item. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the query that we use. To keep our videos quick, I'm going to pre-run the query so I can go over what exactly we are doing. Remember, customer was a subtype of person, so we do need to do an inner join with person and customer and pull the information based on the customer's ID. So we have all the information from person, the base information, as long as also the additional details of customer that we need. That's basically it. So we will uh, create that handler. And let's test out this handler in Postman. So I'm going to create a new collection. Let's call this store. And we're going to add a new request. It's a get request. Copy paste that ID and let's put, and there is a customer. Person ID is 500 501 520. Let's see who this 520 is. So we can send 520. And there you go. There is the person ID is 520. Name is Jane Doe. Address, phone number, and the customer detail. So our customer web service works great. So let's call this customer. All right, so that was our first web service, simple get request to get information about the customer. So let's keep going. The next web service we're going to be creating is creating a cart. So in order to add items to a shopping cart, we first need to create that cart. And that, as you can remember, that when we are inserting something, we're creating something new. So we're inserting. Now, to create a cart, we do need the customer's ID because obviously the cart would require the customer's person ID as the foreign key, and it's going to create the rest of the cart. So we will create a new resource. Let's call this one create cart, and we will also send the customer ID. Okay, so we're going to create a template. And let's say we create a get handler here. And this is again going to be a collection item. Actually, we're going to need to do an insert. So let's do a PL SQL since we do need to do an insert. If you remember, PL SQL requires that you do a begin and then end. But here is the query that we are going to need in this one. So let's take a look at the query and see what we're doing here. So we're basically inserting something into the cart. So we're inserting values like created, completed, and the person ID of the customer. And we are actually inserting based on the customer ID that we got as part of the uh, parameters. Okay. Now here's the important part. Cart has a auto-generated primary key. If you recall, our cart table has a cart ID that gets generated always as identity. So we're not sending that cart ID as part of our request, so it gets created. So we need to figure out how do we send that new cart ID back? Okay. So in order to do this, we first have to get the cart ID from the insert statement. So the way that works is when you insert something that generates a new key, it returns that key that got generated. So it's going to return that cart ID, and we're going to put this into a local variable in our PLSQL statement. Now, in order to do that, we need to declare that variable. So we say declare, and this is the variable that we need. So we are going to say cart ID, and this is, let's say, an int. Okay, so remember semicolon, extremely important. So we got that cart ID back, and then we will set the status code to 201, something new got inserted. And now since this is a GET request, it is expecting a JSON back. So we will need to generate a little JSON on the fly. If you use a post request, you could send it to another GET request that would generate this for you. So that is something that we might take a look at a little later. But right now, what we're using is the call sys.htp.p. That's basically Oracle's. They have a lot of different APIs for uh, building web pages, and this is kind of the simplest of those. It's essentially like a print statement. And what are we printing? We're printing an open curly bracket, cart ID, that's the key, and the value that we're going to put in is the cart ID that we got response from the insert statement. And we close the curly bracket, and that's essentially what we are sending. So let's create this handler, and we're going to test this out. We just saw there's this 520 customer ID that we know that person exists. So we're going to create a new request. This is going to be a post. No, this is still a GET request. And that's the GET request with the customer ID. And the customer ID is going to be 520. Okay, so let's send this and see what happens. All right, see, we just got a new cart ID back. Okay, and that is essentially a cart ID, and that's the number 10162. That's the new cart ID that we got. And every time we send this request, we're going to get a new cart ID. Notice that you don't really have control over what the numbers are going to be because it is an auto-generated field. But the good thing is that every time we send this request, the response will give us what that cart ID is and what the number is. So we can use that in our application. So let's call it create cart. So our cart request works now. So let's take a look at the next step that we're going to do. We have created the cart. Now we're going to view the items. This is simple. Again, we're basically just going to look at all of the items that are in the store. Maybe the user is browsing the items. So that will, again, be another GET request. So we will create a new template, and we will call it products or just product. And this will be a collection query request, just like we did before with a get handler. Collection query is good. And the query essentially will be a join between your product and the subtype classes, and we will return everything back from there. So here is the query. And there are multiple ways of doing this. I just picked the simple process of joining product with the bulk subtype and the package subtype. Notice that I have to use a left outer join because Product may not be bulk or it may not be packaged. So if you did inner, all of a sudden your join does not return anything. So let's create this handler and see how this works. So this is going to be our product handler. So let's go to Postman. We're going to create a new request and we'll call this our product request and we will copy the product URL, paste it in here. Let's send it and see what we get. All right, so we've got several items. We've got, looks like a toaster oven, a mixer, some tea, some Cheerios, some rice, oatmeal, etc., etc. So that's basically what this is sending us. So let's take a look at what we're going to do next. So we just found all of the products. Now we need to add an item to our shopping cart. This time, let's do a post. That way you can see how we could do a post as well. So we will go into our resources. We're going to create a new template. Let's call this one add to cart. This is going to be a post. So we will say this is a post and post by default becomes PLSQL. So let's put our begin exception and semicolon, very important. So the exception, as we saw before, I'm just going to use our standard that says status code is 400 and error message is SQL error message. Now, status code is a standard return item that you can send back, and that status code will be picked up by your web services. But error message, this is a custom one that we created. So in order to send this one back and for uh, the application to understand that this was a custom error message, we will need to add it as an output parameter. So what we do is we're going to add a new row. So this is the name of the parameter. Bind variable is the same one. Access method is out. We're sending this back to the output, and source type is going to be in the response, and the data type is string. That's fine. So we just added that in here. So now let's add the little bit of SQL that we need. So now here is actually kind of an interesting situation here. What if you are adding a new item? Obviously, you're going to do an insert, right? So here is our insert statement. So that sounds pretty good. We're inserting into line item cart ID, SKU, and quantity, and we will need the cart ID, SKU, and quantity as parameters into the web service. But what if that SKU was already in the cart and we add it again to the cart? Now, depending on what you are trying to do in the application, if we just have the insert, you're going to have a duplicate of that cart ID. So you have the same SKU twice in the cart. Might be a better option would be to, instead of an insert, we do an update. We increase the quantity by the new quantity that we just added. Remember, we're inserting the same item again in the cart. So this is where an update might be a better option. Now, what I'm going to show you is how we can actually check. First, try to do the update and see if something got inserted, something got updated. If not, then we can go ahead and do the insert. So we will first try to do the update. Okay, so we're gonna set the line item and change the quantity to whatever quantity we just got as parameter and add it to whatever original quantity was there. where the cart ID is the cart ID that came in and the product is the product that we are trying to add. So we're trying to add this, update the existing line item with an updated quantity. But what if this was not there? Only then we need to do the insert, right? So this is where an if could be useful. So what you do is you use the internal variable called SQL row count. So every time you do an update or an insert or a delete, the system will send back this variable SQL row count. And if that is zero, only then we are going to make this insert and we'll say end if, semicolon, extremely important. And once that is done, we say our standard status code equals colon equals 201. We just got a successful insert, and then we will forward it over probably to another web service that gives you all the details of the cart. So our forward location is going to be a web service that gives you all the details of a cart with the cart ID. Well, you're going to say, well, we don't have a web service like that. So let's go ahead and create that. So I'm going to first create that handler. But before we can test it, we're going to go ahead and add that new web service for the cart. So I am going to create another template and we're going to call it cart ID. So this is going to give me the items in the cart, and this will be a get request. And let's leave it as collection query because it will return multiple items in the cart, right? So it'll be a simple select query that finds everything in that cart. Okay, so here is a cart. We will join with the line items and join it with the product. And it's going to give me the product as SKU, name, quantity, and for all the products in the cart. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that. So let's first check this cart ID. I think we got a cart ID before, right? When we ran this, we got this 10180. So if we test and see what's in this cart, um, 10180, this is probably going to give us nothing, right? It's giving us information about the cart ID, but there is nothing in here. So all the SKU and name quantity are all coming back as null. So that's fine. But we know that our cart web service does work. So let's test out our add to cart web service and see if we can add some products to our cart. So let's see what products we can add. A SKU, let's add some Cheerios, 1001, and some tea, 1040. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to my resource handler for our add to cart. And this is a post, so we will copy that. And remember, the parameters that we need for this post are cart ID, SKU, and quantity. So we will need to create that JSON to send it to this cart. So we're going to create a new request and let's call it add to cart. And so we'll make this a post request. And here is the add to cart request. And now, before we send it, we will need to build the JSON that that we will send it to the cart. So what we will do is we'll say cart ID, and this is now obviously we need a valid cart ID. So let's go back and see 10180. So we will send 10180 to cart ID. What else do we need? We need the SKU and the quantity. So let's go back. Let's say SKU of the product is 1001. I think that was the Cheerios. And we need quantity. Let's say we just got 1 pound. Okay. Or let's just say 2 pounds. I think it's called quantity. Remember that these are the parameters that you're sending in. So in your resource, you're going to be using colon to look at the parameters. So that's important. This QTY, that's the field name or the column name in the table. So you can keep them the same, of course, but just in case they're different, remember which one is which. So let's give this a shot and let's see what happens. If everything works, we got an error message. Okay, so when this happens, we of course need to debug why is this not working. I can immediately see what the issue is, but let's just see how can we debug when your PLSQL code doesn't work. Remember that this interface does not let you do a type check or check. So what we would need to do is copy this and let's go into SQL Command and try to run this in the command line. You can set the language to PLSQL if you want. And then when you run this, it's going to ask you for the parameters. And the only parameters we will need is the quantity, cart ID 180, and the SKU. So all of these guys were going out, so we don't need to worry about them. So now when I click on submit, should tell me where the issue was. And as you can immediately see, line 8, column 5, it says status code must be declared. So line 8, status code. Notice that this is an outgoing um, item, right? So remember that there are two types of variables here, variables that are parameters that are either coming in from your form or your web service or something you're sending back out to the web service. And any of those things, either in or out, needs to start with a colon. If you don't start with a column, then it becomes an internal variable. And if it's an internal variable, that's also okay, but you'll need to declare all your internal variables. So it's basically that's what it's complaining about, that you must declare it. But that's good. That's how you see how you can uh, fix these types of things. We're not going to run this one again here. Let's go back out to the resource handler and fix it here so we can test our, so this is the one that was giving us that error before. I'm going to send it again. This time it worked. So we're getting a JSON back with the cart ID with, you see, we just added Cheerios with quantity 2. Now let's send this again and see if the quantity changes. So let's say I'm going to send 3 more pounds of Cheerios. Okay, or 3 more items of Cheerios. I don't remember if it's a bulk item or a packaged item. So I'm going to send this back. Hopefully, quantity should change now to 5. So let's run this. There you go. Quantity comes back. It becomes 5 now. And if I send a new thing, let's say whatever 1002 is, hopefully there is one like that. Oh, see, this time I got an error message. It said that 1002 is likely not there. So let's take a look at our products and see what we can add. Okay, 1040 is one. So we go back to add to cart. And this is why it's good to have that error message variable so that instead of getting an error, HTML error like we got before, we actually got a message back saying parent key was not found. Remember that the last time when we had the error was actually in the script. There was a syntax error in the script. That, unfortunately, you cannot trap. That is going to crash your web service and you'll have to debug it. But anything that's an SQL error that because of the insert or value was not found, you can actually get the error message back like this. So let's try this other product. What was that? 1040. So we're going to add 1040. And now we should see that our cart contains 5 pounds of Cheerios, and we have this 1040, which is tea, and 3 pounds of that. So now we've got 2 items in the cart. Okay, great. So now we've got all these things in the cart. Let's check out and see what would be the total amount of the cart that we get back. So that's our final step of our workflow. So we have logged in the customer, we have created a new cart, we have viewed the items, we have added items to the cart and viewed the cart, and now we're going to check out this cart. So let's create a new resource handler called checkout. Okay, so we're going to create a new template called checkout, and we will need to send it the cart ID. This can again be a get template, and we will create a new JSON that gives you the total amount for the cart. And what we're going to do is we're basically going to update the cart, and we will set that. Remember, the cart has an attribute called completed. We will set that the payment has been completed. We're not worrying about making sure payment goes through and all of that. That's probably a separate service to a completely separate web service endpoint. But what we're going to do is we will do an update cart statement. Now, this is again going to be a PLSQL. So we'll say begin, end, and we will also do an exception because this is a lot of things that could go wrong in here. So same exception as before. We'll send back an error message. And again, just like before, if we're sending back an error message, we're going to add a row with that variable. So it goes back to our output as a response, and the data type is string. So that's good. So now what we will do is, what are we doing? We are updating the cart and setting the completed to be 1 or true, basically, when for that cart ID that we just sent in as parameters. Now, what we could also do is we can send back to the request. So we just checked out. Maybe we want to know what was the total for this order. Okay, so we will need to write a little bit of SQL. And so here is our MySQL for finding the total value of the cart. This is actually one place where I had an interesting observation. So my initial query was, I'm going to sum quantity times the price for every packaged item. Okay. And I'm going to add the quantity times price per pound for all the bulk item, right? It works great when you have both packaged item and bulk item in your cart, but if either of them does not return anything, remember that when you're doing left outer join, whenever there is no match on the right side, it's going to return you a null. Turns out that if you sum null, that becomes a null as well. Well, that makes sense. But what happens is, if you take a null and add it to something that is not null, common sense would probably tell you that that should return you something. Null plus something should be that something. Unfortunately, null plus anything is also null in Oracle. So what you would need to do is, I had to do a little Google search and found out that there is a function called null value, or NVL, in Oracle that essentially gives you the option, what should we do when something is null? So it takes 2 parameters. It takes whatever parameter that may or may not be null, and if it is null, what is the value that should be returned? So what I'm saying is if price times quantity is null, then return 0. And the same thing, if price pound per pound times quantity is null, then return 0. Now, notice that again, we are using into total. So total is an internal variable, so we will need to declare it. So we will say declare, and total, I believe total should be a number. So we just declared that. So now our query is done. So we've got the total amount. Okay. So what we will need to do is just like before, we're going to do a generate a new code that sends back that information. So this is the important part. Again, sys.htp.p, that's our print statement. And what are we printing? We're printing little generated JSON that sends back the total amount for the order that we just created. And here's the total. That's the variable that we just calculated from this select statement. Okay. So let's see how that works. Hopefully there's no errors, but if there is an error, we will fix it. And here's our copy to clipboard. So now we will get a new request and we're going to call this one checkout. And I think the cart ID that we have been using is 10180. 10180. And let's see what do we get back. Our total for the order was $30.92 based on that query. And somewhere I had thought that 301 was the right option, but looks like this is we probably should use 201. We just got something inserted. So I'm going to go back to resource handler. We're going to change the status code here to 201 and apply changes. Let's run this to make sure that we get that back. Yes, 201 created. That's what we want. We created a new checkout and we got our order total back. So that's essentially how you use web services to implement an entire workflow. And you notice that how we did all of these different things using web services. So now we are ready to build an application that can use these web services to provide a nice graphical user interface or whatever kind of interface that you're building. So that's how you use web services to build application. Hope this was useful. If it was, feel free to leave me your comments or send me more requests of types of videos you'd like to see. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.